Welcome into Basketball by Association. My name is Arky. That is Joel C. Cortez. Joel, hello. February is almost here, which means I can almost smell the All-Star game, and I can almost smell it in disgusting Indianapolis. Yes.
Indianapolis is underrated. There's actually
It's a midtown.
It is not a bad Midwestern town as far as Midwestern towns go. Indianapolis and Milwaukee, I will give them their props, are both really fun cities.
I like
as
Milwaukee.
Far as the Midwest goes.
I like Milwaukee a lot. Indianapolis, not so much. Not so much. So
that's fair.
Thank you, Joel, for allowing me that little bit of leeway and that grace here on this.
Sorry, Indy, I tried, but I will say this: the Pacers Stadium is one of my favorites in the NBA.
I think it's the worst, actually. I think.
Oh, get out of here! Get out! Listen, it is a classy building.
Now, some of this is still. I'm still butthurt about Reggie Miller. That's fine. Okay.
Right. It's not Market Square Arena or whatever it used to be called. It's not even that building anymore.
No, but he's still associated with that franchise, and everything they touch is garbage. That's all I'm telling you. They're not Brooklyn Nets bad, like just terrible, right? But and I do hate the Celtics a lot more.
I was going to say you have to hate them in the Sixers and probably the Heat more than you do the Pacers, right?
Oh, I do hate him, yeah, but based on one guy, literally just one guy. And really, particularly one performance.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to hold some grudges. That's only what
20 eons ago. Yeah, let's just call it eons at this point.
I'm going to tell you this: I get over stuff really easily, unless you're hurting.
I can tell. I can really tell.
Unless you're hurting my teams, I don't hold grudges. And if you hurt my teams, I hold grudges. So Reggie, you can go to HE double hockey sticks. That's right. Is this a Reggie Miller episode? It better be.
Yeah, I'm giving up naming episodes after players. It's getting hard to find new guys, so we can name these randomly over whoever we want. Like I'm turning the reins over to you.
Let's name this one the Doc Rivers episode, as in why is Doc Rivers getting another job and why is it with this team? Why is it with this team? You guys know the news already if you're listening to this podcast. Doc Rivers, the brand new head coach of a good team that was playing pretty darn good basketball, but that's not enough for everybody.
A team that we don't want to see suck. We don't want to see the Milwaukee Bucks suck. We don't want that.
And I don't want a first round
We're in agreement. Collapse. Like you as a Knicks fan, me as a Timberwolves fan.
Yeah, I like Milwaukee.
A Game 7 collapse.
I love the city. I love the franchise. I love that Giannis embraced it so much there. The fact that he re-signed and made a big deal about sort of being that franchise's guy. I'm a big proponent of that.
We like Dame Lillard. We'd love for Dame to get a ring at some point. Yeah,
I like Dame. I don't love him. He's fine. Maybe he shouldn't be a starter. Maybe Jalen Brunson should be a starter anyway. But listen, why Doc Rivers? What happened? I don't like what they did to Adrian Griffin, who, I don't know, just won 30 out of 43 games. Feels like a good start, right? And I don't like what they did bringing Doc Rivers. What Doc Rivers makes... You know how, like, in the NFL especially, they used to sort of give the NFL a lot of crap. Not so much now, but they used to, like, 10 years ago, especially before, that they would just constantly recycle the same names over and over and over. It just didn't matter, like, how bad you were. You'd get another fourth, fifth shot at this. Doc Rivers is turning into that, man. Like, Doc Rivers has won enough games in the regular season a bunch of times to get to the playoffs.
He'll be a Hall of Famer. He will be rightly a Hall of Famer because of the regular season record and the one ring. Yep.
And if you wanted to, let's say, Charlotte, right? Like if the Hornets wanted to take a shot on him and he would go there.
Yeah, get him to the next level. He's the guy who can get you into playoff contention to that next level, but not the next level.
Yeah, this is the team that literally won the NBA championship.
This is a team that literally fired Mike Budenholzer because he was incapable of making in-game adjustments in late-game situations in must-win games. So they fired him and hired Adrian Griffin, and now they basically got Mike Budenholzer 2.0 or the rich man's version of Budenholzer, however you feel about him, whatever. Doc Rivers is the same coach with the same problems. He does not make in-game adjustments. He loses close games. The record is damning. It's like 33 losses in clinching type of games, and game 7 losses is an insane number at this point, and it's all happened recently. Like, this is a trend, not, oh, he's got this in his past and it's all better, but he's been hit or miss since then. It's one of those statistics that you don't want to hang your hat on. No, please hang all of your hats on these recent statistics, because it has been this way now for a decade.
Joel, Doc Rivers has a record in the playoffs of 16-33 when his team has 3 wins in the series already.
Yes.
All right. Joe, can I ask you this? I want to...
And by the way, his players don't typically like him all that much.
People aren't going to bet. Okay.
That has been a recurring theme since the Celtics days, where those guys did buy in, did like him. But since those days, in his other stops, players have been really iffy on Doc Rivers. You don't hear him getting credit. They don't really throw him under the bus all that much, but you don't hear guys being like, oh yeah, I love Doc. Doc is the man. I'll go to war with him any day. You don't hear that.
Yeah. Okay. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this, because I think the Bucks are still going to be good. They're not going to collapse. They're going to be fine, but they're not worried about the regular season. They're not worried about the first round of the playoffs. Mm-hmm. It's the semis and beyond that they're trying to get to again. And it's just a bizarre choice.
By the way,
this Milwaukee team is paying now 3 coaches. They're paying. That's what bad college football programs do, is pay 3 or 4 former head coaches. They are paying 3 coaches right now. They are paying Budenholzer. They are paying Adrian Griffin for half a season of work and beyond. And now they're starting up a brand new contract with Doc Rivers. And go ahead, sorry.
It would be one thing if we're 46 games into the season and you're sitting 21-25. If you're the Chicago Bulls and you're sitting in 9th place and you go, this is not what we signed up for, especially if you were Milwaukee and you're hovering like even just a couple games over 500. If Milwaukee was, let's say, 24-21, that's Miami Heat territory, in 7th place, you could look at Adrian Griffin and go, dude is in way over his head. We made a mistake. We shouldn't have done this. We brought in Dame Lillard. This is not what we signed up for. I get that players, it sounds like we're having concerns about the game plans repeatedly. And it sounded like Adrian Griffin had a lot to learn. Maybe the learning curve was a little bit higher as a head coach than what was anticipated. Dude was in Toronto with Nick Nurse. He's been on a lot of good coaching staffs. He's been an assistant. So if it wasn't what you wanted, I get that. And I get maybe the learning curve was there. And if the players are having concerns, fine. I know it's a championship or bust type of atmosphere now, Milwaukee, and that's great. But it's the dude's first half season, and you thought so highly of him that you brought him in on a long-term contract. You got to let him get through the first season at least. And if his team flamed out in the first round again, like Budenholzer's Bucks did last year, yes, then maybe you think about Doc Rivers. Maybe. But this is not like when you handed Steve Nash the reins in Brooklyn, or you handed Jason Kidd the reins in Brooklyn, or even Steve Kerr going to Golden State, where guys are going, look, they never were coaches before. What is happening? And then there were growing pains. Steve Kerr at least had been a front office guy before with Phoenix. This is different. Adrian Griffin's been around the block. He didn't deserve this, even if things were not going the way you wanted, but they were still in 2nd place. They were tied for the best record that Minnesota and Oklahoma City have out west. They're sitting 2nd in the East and just a few games behind Boston. It makes no sense, especially to ditch him for Doc.
And he's not coaching right now. They're still finalizing negotiations. They beat the Cavs the other night with not Adrian Griffin or Doc Rivers.
Right.
That was a Cavs team that, by the way,
he's been an assistant in these situations a ton of times now, where he's had the team for like 4 or 5 games.
That Cavs team was on an 8-game winning streak, and this Milwaukee Bucks team somehow persevered through all of their lack of talent and terrible coaching.
Yeah.
I don't know. one last question, and then we can move on because we will see Milwaukee collapse in the playoffs. That's a guarantee at this point.
Which is sad. Dame doesn't deserve that. Giannis doesn't deserve that.
Has anybody gotten more run out of one title 16 years ago than Doc Rivers? Boston gave him a long leash.
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and now Milwaukee. You got to imagine Milwaukee's not bringing him in there, especially if they're if they've paying 3 coaches, that they don't want to get rid of him very quickly. So, like, they're going to give him a pretty decent leash, no matter what they do in the playoffs this year.
I can't think of anybody recently. I mean, Rudy T got a shorter leash with 2 titles, although he kind of wanted to stop coaching.
I mean,
he
Mike
got
Budenholzer got fired an hour and a half after winning a title. Right?
It felt like it. But again, if you lose in the first round like they did in 5 games, I get it. Because a lot of the
removed from the title.
But a lot of the concerns that saw them lose that series were there all throughout, and they just happened to win the title on top of it.
You say just happened. The team was basically the same.
Yeah,
the coaching was basically the same.
I mean, the only other guy that kept getting such a long leash and he never even won a title was Thibodeau, right? That's the only other guy I can think of where it's like he just kept popping up over and over and over again.
He's not won a title yet. Don't worry, yet. Yeah,
fair. And it could happen to Nick Nurse. He got the one in Toronto. He's in Philly now. He's going to get a long leash and a lot of different gigs for it too. And hopefully he gets more. Rick Carlisle's only got 1 title with Dallas, and he got a really long leash with the Mavericks after that. He's back with the Pacers. So I mean, there are guys who have floated around, I guess, but yeah, it feels like Doc is the poster boy for this.
These high-profile jobs.
Yeah.
These high-profile jobs. Because Milwaukee may not be the biggest market out there, but it's got one of the 2 or 3 biggest stars in the entire game.
Yeah.
And they're a year and a half removed from a world championship. I mean, this isn't okay. I reserve most of my anger for the rivals of my teams.
Frank Vogel is the other guy I think that is more analogous to Doc, where he got the Phoenix job and is going to get more jobs, and I'm not real sure if he's a needle mover championship coach. No,
but I don't think there were a lot of people that really sort of thought Frank Vogel was a great coach that they wanted to keep hiring. I think you tell me if you disagree, and then we can move on. I think more people thought that team won a title not because of him.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Like, that wasn't his team, so to speak. And you get this a lot with LeBron guys. Like, they just sort of, is this the coach? I mean, I don't know. I mean, speaking of LeBron, that was the last time someone was fired this early in the season.
Yeah,
after being really good. It's like, all right. And even he hasn't gotten that much of a run. Although he's been good now. I mean, he's been good. Forget it. I don't want to keep getting off because I'm going to keep going down a rabbit hole of coaches that deserve it versus don't deserve it versus keep getting these chances.
Yeah, you're right. This is the wrong spot. Doc Rivers would have made sense for a team that's trying to get back over the hump. Chicago,
but he also would have taken those jobs.
Probably not. But again, he's just so barely removed from the Philly job where, again, that flame out. To me, you let Doc Rivers sit for a couple of years, be a broadcaster, and then you think about it again if you're the right situation and he's ready to come back. But you're right. Handing him the keys to the car in Milwaukee, especially when they're 31-13, I'll never understand this. Never.
I'm with you. I don't know. It bums me.
On that note,
okay,
this is Basketball by Association, everybody.
That's right. We'll see you guys next week on the Doc Rivers Sucks show. Okay, I'm not. We're done with this. I did want to bring up something that was kind of magical that happened this week, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it briefly before we get into the All-Star game stuff and the trade stuff.
Mm-hmm.
May I just bring up the fact that we had a guy score 70 points this week. Someone who's really, really good. You may know him. He's the MVP of the league, reigning and potentially going to win again. Joel Embiid. And then the same night, and by the way, I was texting you about this. You just ghosted me. Whatever, bro. Okay. Big Cat, Karl Anthony Towns was throwing 62 of his own down. One team everybody's really excited about one team doing it. The locker room blowing up over the other guy doing it, despite kind of one's a win and one's a loss. But, hey, listen, Joel, do you agree with your coach in Minnesota that was selfish basketball in that one game out of 82 that Cat was going for 62, which, by the way, he was hot and stayed hot. I mean, what did he throw down in the first half? What was it again?
I got to go back. It was like 48 in the first half, I think.
44? 40, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it might be 44. I got to go back
to the box further. It was insane. Like, that was potential history being made. But again, you got to get the win or it doesn't count. And then Joel Embiid obviously gets the win and goes for 70. So let me ask you first about your team. Was it selfish basketball? Did you hate Karl Anthony Towns scoring points, yes or no?
I did not hate him scoring points in the first half because they were coming within the flow of the offense. He was knocking down shots. He was aggressive. He was doing exactly what Karl Anthony Towns should do.
And it was fun, right? It was fun to watch one guy just heat up like that.
It was, and he was definitely on a heater. I think where Chris Finch has a point, and he has come out to say repeatedly, I'm not calling out Karl Anthony Towns specifically, and I don't really have a problem with the offense. The selfish basketball aspect was defensively, where they let a Hornets team that up till that point had only won 9 games get to the rim over and over and over again, even though this is supposed to be the number 1 ranked defense in the league. And the selfishness he was talking about is guys just thought, we're going to roll in. We're at home. We're going to roll over Charlotte. We don't really have to defend them because we're scoring so much. And then in the second half, Towns was shot hunting a little bit, but guys were also kind of being selfish for Towns and force feeding him the basketball instead of playing within rhythm. And to me, here's the stat that says it all. Karl Anthony Towns put up 62 points in a loss at home where his team blows an 18-point lead that they had with, I think, a minute left in the third. Karl Anthony Towns in plus minus was a 0 on the night that he scored 62 points. Plus minus is not the only stat out there, but sometimes they tell story. That means he gave up in his minutes as much as he got in scoring 62 points. And here's the kicker, Arky Shea. This is where it really becomes damning. On the night that Victor Wembanyama gave up 70 points to Joel Embiid. Remember, Embiid didn't do this against nobody. He did this against the up-and-coming kid, and Wembanyama had 33 points on the night, whatever. Victor Wembanyama gives up 70 and was 0 in plus minus for the evening. That means he gave up 70 points, and again, he's not the only guy that guarded Joel Embiid, whatever. But in his time was still doing other things to get close to accommodate for 70 points he gave up, whereas Karl Anthony Towns is on the other end, scoring 62, but giving up just what he got. To me, it shows, again, those were empty points for Towns. He was not the only guy. There were plenty of others who did not play the game plan defensively, offensively, whatever, but it does go like, Towns, you could have defended a hell of a lot better than you did, and that's been an ongoing problem with him. And a guy like Victor Wembanyama gets torched, yet still did enough to stay close, in the production value.
No, says a lot. I do get that to a degree. And also, Chris Finch is trying to essentially, like, we know what Joel Embiid is, right? And we know what he can do, and we know what this Philadelphia team can do. We want to see how far they can get now with a brand new coach and a new system, and maybe some of those postseason adjustments and in-game adjustments can make this team do what I've been thinking for 5 years that they were going to do, and they just kept not doing. Finch is trying to make sure this team stays focused. And stay focused on what makes them really good and really talented, what makes them float.
Which is their defense. Their defense.
Right. And listen,
not their offense.
I know in the locker room, like, I think I saw they asked Anthony Edwards afterwards, like, hey, man, he was just hot. Just let him score, man, kind of thing. But
Edwards had 11 assists. He was clearly trying to set up Towns. Edwards was conspicuously non-aggressive. That's not a recipe for success with the Wolves, but he was trying to make the right play. And again, Towns was not, through 2.5 quarters making stupid decisions. He was knocking down the shots he should have. It was the right move. But
even the logo before the shot before the half.
But as he got cold, I'm fine with it all. As he got cold and the rhythm was gone, instead of everybody going back to that well over and over, they needed to get to the paint. They were playing an undermanned Hornets team that was missing most of its centers. They had to start PJ Washington at center. And the Wolves were chucking threes all night and not getting into the paint to use their advantage that they had. They were, in size at the rim. You've got Rudy Gobert. Towns is a good post player. Naz Reid is a phenomenal post player. Anthony Edwards gets to the rim. All that stuff. They were not ever collapsing the defense. It was just chucking threes. And then on the other end, you as the number one defense in the league are a turnstile to the Hornets, who, yes, have talent. Terry Rozier, LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges. It's a talented starting lineup, but you were just letting them march to the rim. Again, here's the difference. The Sixers played a really crappy Spurs team, and they beat them while Embiid scored 70 points. They got the win. The Wolves played an equally crappy Charlotte Hornets team, put up a crap ton of points, and lost. They didn't do their job. So Finch, I think, has a point. I get that he's kind of calling out Towns, but he was rightfully spreading the rest of the blame around. And I do look at that night and go, Mike Conley was hurt that night and didn't play. Would mature Mike Conley have allowed the offense to get that far off track and that tunnel vision? I don't think so. I would hope not. But again, it is one game out of 82. Hopefully it's a lesson game. To do that at home, though, and to blow the 18-point lead, I think is really where it becomes obvious, like what Finch is saying. Y'all weren't out there to play winning basketball, and he said we disrespected the game, and the game came back on us the exact same way the exact way it should have. Like the game should have torched us, and it did.
Yeah, and you'd be up a game and a half. It's a half game right now in the West. And
every single game matters, including against a doormat like Charlotte. You can't roll in and just think. And I will say this: I've seen this coming with the Wolves, because for the last 4 or 5 games, and they've been about 500, they have not started well. They've not been focused. And then they've been able to pick things up by the second half and beat the bad teams. They beat Detroit. They beat a couple of other bottom feeders, but they lost to Oklahoma City doing that.
I believe you. I believe that they did. Oh, it's on the schedule. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I don't really have to believe you. It's on the schedule. It happened. The game did.
So maybe it's a wake-up call. They kind of sleptwalked into Washington, didn't play well in the first half, but they beat Washington because the Wizards suck. And they barely beat the Nets by 2 points the other night. So it's
not the Washington Wizards. I mean, the soon-to-be Virginia Wizards, right?
It's that point of the season for Minnesota where you've gotten out to that early lead. You've been the front runner. And now are you going to be able to dig in during the doldrums and keep this going? Or do you begin to lose focus because there are going to be other teams that come up behind you that have been running the marathon, letting you set the pace, and they're going to make a push. And that's going to be a real big test of Minnesota's staying power now as Oklahoma City and Denver and the Clippers and a couple of these other really good teams out west begin to push at them. Do you have that focus or not to be able to beat the Hornets on a night where you feel like it should just be fun and games?
I don't know. I mean, I, for one, am one that definitely predicted it to be Minnesota, OKC 1 and 2 by the time we get to near the All-Star break. So, I mean, we'll see what the doldrums do to other teams, the weak ones like Denver and such. But we'll see.
If that was true, Arky, Shea, you wouldn't be on this show because you would have made so much money in your betting side hustle here that you wouldn't even need this.
God bless those two teams, man. They've been good from the very beginning, and they've been. I mean, OKC can say that's not as sexy as possible, but man, they're young. They got 1,000 draft picks. They got some good young players that people are excited about. And that city is embrace that franchise. There may not be a better single game, big time game atmosphere in the NBA besides New York.
And they're fun to watch. The Thunder are fun. They are a fun team.
They're a good team. If you haven't given yourself through the first half of the season a chance to just, watch the Thunder, and I think we said it at the beginning of the season, before the season, that hey, we were going to pay attention to OKC. They're going to be fun to watch. But
we said they're coming. Yep.
we didn't know how far up the standings they would be. We thought they'd be playoff contenders, like they would be teasing and dancing around the playoffs. We didn't think they'd be shooting right down the barrel of the number one seed at this point.
This year's Thunder are last year's Sacramento Kings. The Kings were so much fun last year. Everybody, it took a little while to get to it, but then once they did it, like, ooh, all right, I can get on board with this. That's what the Thunder are this year.
And it's a fun game to watch, not only just the product, but if you just turn on your stereo, your surround sound, oh, man. OKC home game, that if I had to choose an NBA arena to go to, the most massive game it could possibly be, the one arena I would want to go to experience it, probably above all else, is OKC. Like I love just being around rabid enthusiasm. You know, there's loud, and then there's just rabidity. There's just the insane amount. These people.
It's what Utah used to be. You know,
yeah, it's what Utah
they
had their time. Used to be without the racism. This is what they
well, probably a bit less, but
well, there are black people in OKC. I'll just say this: that there are not in Utah. That's a fact. That's a fact. There's none in Salt Lake City. I can prove it. Don't ask me to, but I can prove it. The All-Star starters were announced as the All-Star game goes back to East and West. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but how about LeBron James, a 20-time All-Star? And he's obviously going to be the starter. They're going back to East-West, which I prefer. And so we got, LeBron, Nikola Jokic, Kevin Durant, Luka, and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. And for the East, you got, Joel Embiid. Interesting. Giannis, Jason Tatum, Tyrese Halliburton, and should have been Jalen Brunson, not Dame Lillard, but it's Dame Lillard. I mean,
I'm surprised. I'm surprised that Dame got it, because this is the fan vote, and usually things skew towards the biggest markets. Usually New York and the two LA teams kind of have a built-in advantage, or back when Yao was playing, you had the built-in China vote advantage for Rockets players. That it is that popularity contest. So I was surprised that Jalen didn't get it with the New York fan base behind him voting.
Do New Yorkers not know what the internet is? Let's get to using their. Do they think it was all paper ballots? They had to go somewhere and go to like a Foot Locker somewhere and fill in a ballot. That's not how this works anymore.
I mean, Dame's had a very good season. It's not that he's undeserving. It's just that Brunson felt about equally deserving. You know,
no, Jalen Brunson was more deserving. Jalen Brunson's killing it this year. He is absolutely killing it this year. Milwaukee, look, how do they get two players when they're firing their coach? That's not fair.
Fair question.
But I respect the hell out of Tyrese Halliburton and the fact that the fans have really gotten on this guy and really sort of been like, okay, we're seeing the emergence of somebody this year. We've talked about
now he gets Pascal Siakam next to him, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes.
Yeah. But so I just want to mention, the All-Star this voting briefly, but the fact that we've talked about it for a couple of years and the fans are now sort of, I think, fully on top of, because he's a highlight reel. He's a highlight machine. He is what Ja Morant was as Ja Morant was coming up, as far as the excitement and the interest to be able to watch him. Obviously, very different players, but
and the mirror image of him on the other side, even though he's a better defender, but as far as the excitement factor of a young guard, is Shea Gilgeous-Alexander from OKC. Small markets, lead guard, absolutely the MVP of their team. Super fun to watch. They drive the whole car with what they do, even though they're different players, but they're playing the same position, and I love it for both those guys.
LeBron, 20-time All-Star. He's in his 21st season in the NBA.
And here's what's so amazing about that. Like, regardless of how you feel about LeBron, what's so amazing about those 20 years, besides breaking the record, there's not a single one of us out there going, man, it's BS that LeBron's been a 20-time All-Star. He didn't deserve 3 or 4 of those. It was the popularity vote, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, none of us are saying that. Yeah. We're all going, yup.
Yeah.
Every single year,
really good.
He deserved to be there.
He's had a great first half of the season. Understand the vote. This isn't just a popularity thing. I mean, partly is, but he's killing it.
Not in this case. Yep.
Yeah.
This is not putting Yao in when he was hurt, or, some of these other votes where a guy's gotten in and you go, yeah, no.
Or even like MVP votes where people are just like, dude, I'm tired of this one guy winning, so Steve Nash gets to win You're like, okay, I mean, Steve Nash is really good, but
Mm-hmm.
was he the most valuable player? Like, is that what we're
Twice? I could see once, twice, and I loved Steve Nash. I'm a huge Steve Nash
He's not a
apologist.
2-time MVP. I mean, he is.
Probably not back to back. Yeah, probably
not. No, listen, he throws a mean assist that he loved to dish them dimes.
Well, and dude was a knockdown, 50, 40, 90 shooter too. But
50, 40, 90, whatever that means. Those are just numbers to me. I don't know. So was those points average per game?
They are literally just numbers.
Thank you for understanding. So we've been gone for a couple weeks because, well, in my area, we got tons of snow and ice, which means it shut down everything. So I couldn't use...
Including the internet, apparently.
Most of my equipment. And then I couldn't get a screaming toddler away from me for 20 minutes to do a podcast. So we've missed a couple of trades I wanted to be able to bring up here before we get out of this podcast. Not the most recent one. I guess we can start with the most recent one. Actually, no, they happened on the same day, if I'm not mistaken. They may have happened the same day, right?
No, if we're talking Siakam and Rozier, they're a couple. They're separated by a week or more, actually.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Anyway, when you get shut down in the house for a week, we call it COVID. Get it? Remember,
you're a young dad with young kids. It is entirely defensible. Time
I just don't know what day it is.
Time has no meaning. Yeah.
Like I'm surprised that we're doing this podcast now. We agree on a date, and I just don't remember the date. So like I'm surprised we're here, even in my calendar. So the Raptors trade Pascal Siakam to the Indiana Pacers. And so how this works is that the 3-team deal. The New Orleans Pelicans receive about $45. The Pacers receive Pascal Siakam and a future second-round pick. That one comes from the Pelicans. And the Raptors get Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora, Kyra Lewis. I'm not a big fan of Kyra Lewis, but I do like Kyra Lewis. A couple of first-round picks in, this year's draft, and a conditional 2026 pick. So, Joel, your thoughts on Pascal Siakam, who was rumored to be going to New York not that long ago. That was before certain trades have happened. And now he is going to find himself on a very high-flying, high-scoring, defense need not apply Indiana Pacers team.
I love adding Pascal Siakam to the Pacers. It is an absolute head-scratcher to me that they had to move Bruce Brown as part of the deal when they had just acquired him. He was the big get. He was also a guy who was really helpful for them through the first half of the season. It kind of feels like the Adrian Griffin situation. Like, why you got to do Bruce Brown like that? He helped you get to this point. He's a champion. He was one of the glue guys for that Denver Nuggets team. And now you're going to ship him off to Toronto, where they're in kind of half rebuild mode. And yes, he's going to be really valuable there. Bruce Brown is really valuable everywhere he goes. I get that he's not a big scorer. Yeah, I get that he's not a big scorer. And Siakam is the better player. There's no question about that. What I really don't get is you could not figure out a way to make this deal and keep Bruce Brown. I get that the Pacers have tons of other wings. Aaron Nesmith is good. Buddy Hield is nice. Ben Mathurin really looks like a good player coming up. Andrew Nembhard is valuable too. Those are all part of the wing rotation in Indiana. They're part of what has made that team really fun to watch. Bruce Brown was still, I think, the most impactful of all of those 5 wings. You couldn't have packaged a few of the other ones. Maybe even Ben Mathurin. I don't know. Maybe the Pacers see something in him. Long term, he does look like a good player. He does look like a good player.
Early to give up on Ben Mathurin, I would think, and he's been pretty good.
Yeah, no, I see that, but I don't know. Whatever the price was, Bruce Brown going to Toronto doesn't make a ton of sense to me as far as his fit there, and getting rid of him doesn't make a ton of sense to me for Indiana's case. But at the end of the day, you add a clear second wheel all-star caliber player, and you don't have to give up Miles Turner. So you have a big 3 of Halliburton, Siakam, and Turner. You keep together, by and large, most of your supporting cast. And adding Pascal Siakam to run with Tyrese Halliburton, to me, feels a lot like the Kings adding Sabonis to run with De'Aaron Fox. It is really
put him over the top. Yeah.
It's really, really impactful.
Yeah.
Siakam is a two-way player. He's smart. He's athletic. He does a little bit of everything. It was very clear over the last 2 years, couple of years in Toronto. No, he cannot be your number one wheel. He shouldn't be. But to put him as your running mate and to slide Miles Turner back down to the third option, which I think is a lot more comfortable for him to concentrate defensively and then to come and just be that pick and pop center where he really wants to thrive. Siakam can play from all three levels. It's a coup for the Indiana Pacers because Siakam is fleet-footed, man. And this is a Pacers team that, like you said, thank God they want to run as much as they do. The league needs teams like that. Indiana deserves a team like that after all these years of having Pacers as your team and being plotting, defensive-oriented, duke it out. Those were all well and good, but give Indiana a fun basketball team, and Siakam will fit in with that. And so far, so good. Like they won the other night against Philly. Siakam 26 and 10, and well, that's 26 points, 10 assists, and 13 boards. They beat the Sixers by double digits with no Tyrese Halliburton. I like this. I like this at the same level as Sabonis going to Sacramento, and we've all seen how that worked out. It unlocked De'Aaron Fox. It made the Kings a legit threat, and Indiana suddenly becomes a legit threat.
I tell you, when I first saw this trade, and I was like, Pascal Siakam's getting traded. I didn't know who he was getting traded to. Sorry, Pascal Siakam was being traded. I was like, oh, I mean, I thought Toronto. We thought when Toronto was making moves with New York earlier, we're like, clearly looks like they're trying to clear the path for a rebuild, right? Mm-hmm. So why not get a bunch of picks, which they did, by the way. They got 3 first.
Yeah, and to take a flyer on quickly and Barrett as young guys, it makes sense.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, well, who they're going to go to? And I saw it was Indiana, and I was like, uh-oh. I don't love it. As someone whose team is in the East, I did not love sort of seeing that Toronto gave him to Indiana. Because I agree. Indiana is a dangerous team now. Before they had Pascal Siakam. Mm-hmm. And now they're uber dangerous. They're super, uber dangerous. And it doesn't matter if they're going to win the East. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. Probably not.
But yeah, there's a lot of really good teams ahead of them.
But they're going to scare somebody. Mm-hmm. They're going to scare somebody, and they're going to win 1 or 2 games in a playoff series that they shouldn't, and maybe that does win you a series.
They're also, I think, 3-1 against Milwaukee this season, for example.
Yeah, that rivalry that's been starting to heat up really nicely. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty pumped to see that one to continue. So, yeah, this team has built. Remember when the Sacramento Indiana trade happened, right? And we were like,
Halliburton forced Sabonis.
Yeah. This was for Sabonis. This was a win. We thought this was a win for both of them. Like both teams were going to be able to win. And Sacramento started winning sooner because they they were, I think, a little bit better equipped maybe than for.
Yeah. Yep.
And now Indiana's, they're right on the cusp. I think they're I have to look at the standings. They're still in the playoffs right now as it stands. They're
25-20. They hit a skid after they got into the NBA Cup, finals or whatever.
Yeah, so they're essentially 3 games out of hosting, right? They're 3 games out of hosting.
They're in 6th place, so they are locked in to a playoff spot as of right now, which feels about where they should be.
As much as that place sucks, it's a hard place to win. It's a talk about rabid crowds. Mm-hmm. That's a crowd that loves their basketball too. Indiana, famous for loving their basketball, and they are all in on the Pacers. And now they got a really good, really fun team to watch. They're exciting every single night, and they're scaring me.
And if you're Pascal Siakam, you got to be like just high-fiving the sky on this one to go, all right, we had a good run in Toronto. I got a ring, but it was clearly not going anywhere at this point, and now I get to go back into a situation like where the Raptors were, not a huge market, but the fan base is 110% behind their team. And you're back into a well-coached situation with Rick Carlisle. You've got talented teammates. They need you. They want you there. And he's reached that point of his game where Pascal Siakam is no longer an upside guy. He's been an upside guy for a long time, but he's in the prime of his career. And you get to show out and really challenge, Boston, Milwaukee, and Philly all feel like they're better. But is New York and Cleveland and Miami better than Indiana? No, they all feel like they're in that same tier where anybody could win one of those series. And like you said, Indiana's going to scare some people, and this is good for them.
They could scare their way into the Eastern Finals. Absolutely, I
could
could see them in the Eastern Finals. And depending on who the matchup is, I mean, I don't hate their odds to be able to do it with the way this lineup is constructed right now.
I don't think they really want to see somebody like New York or Miami who is going to gum things up and turn it into that slow duke it out type of sloppy game, because that's the only way, not the only way, but the preferred way that New York or Miami will win games.
Sure.
For Miami, that probably is the only way they can win. But, New York can do it a couple of different ways. So you probably don't want to see them. But even still, if I'm New York or Miami, I don't really want to see the Pacers and go, we have to play this perfectly and turn it into such a slop fest to even have a chance. We cannot run with these guys. We cannot run with them.
I don't think New York can run with them, but I think New York can slop it up, but they're also more skilled than they've been at any time under Thibodeau and any time probably in the last 15 years to be able to run a little bit. Like if they needed to, if
they can manufacture offense at this point. Yeah,
I agree with that. Other trade that was happening, I wanted to get your thoughts on. Terry Rozier is no longer a Charlotte Hornet. What? He was in Charlotte? Anyway, Kyle Lowry is going to go away from the Heat in that exchange. And also the Heat are give a lottery protected draft pick for, I don't know, it's like 3 or 4 years from now. Doesn't really matter at this point. But the Miami Heat trade away Kyle Lowry, 37-year-old Kyle Lowry, 17 years in the league. And they get scary Terry Rozier. Miami 24-21 right now. They're hovering around viability for the playoffs. But we've seen this from Miami 1,000 times, it feels like. That they don't have to be great, that they just have to get in. And once they get in, as long as they've been building their team, they're fine with how they go. This is that team that always just quietly makes a move or two. Next thing you know, they're like the 6th seed, maybe the 7 or even the 8th seed. And you're like, oh, I don't want to see them. And here they go. They make another move getting rid of Lowry. What do you think of moving on from Lowry?
Moving on from Lowry, it sucks for Kyle. They brought him in a few years ago. He was a big get at that time, leaving Toronto, being a former champion. He played the good soldier road and he fit in Miami for sure. He's not going to stay in Charlotte. They will try to seek a trade for him before the deadline, and if they don't get it, they'll buy him out. So Kyle Lowry will wind up on a different contender somewhere as a backup point guard, and good for Kyle. But for Miami, this is a godsend. We know they're a defensive-oriented team. We know they're about keeping it close, out-executing people, and just kind of strangling the game with their execution. But Miami is 4th worst, so 27th in offense in the league.
Oh, really? I hadn't seen that number.
Yeah, they're only averaging 110 points per game, which back in the day, that would have been insane. That's an insanely high number for back in the day. But in today's NBA, that gets you 27th place offensively. And they badly need scoring help. They need some punch, especially off the bench. I think the offense in the starting lineup with Tyler Hero, with Jimmy Butler, with Bam Adebayo, you can make that offensive work no matter who jumps in. But the issue is that over the years, the last couple seasons, Miami has lost some of their really helpful scoring guys. And so Tyler Hero used to be the scorer off the bench that would get the second unit going. Right now, they've started Terry Rozier, but I don't know if that's the best spot for him. And I think they're just taking a look, trying to get him in sync with the rest of the starters, because he is going to play down the stretch with the starting group. But I do think Terry Rozier has shown himself both in Charlotte, in Boston. Ideally, he is your 6th man gunner. He takes over the Tyler Hero role for this team, ideally. Put Jaime Jaquez Jr. back in the starting lineup when he's healthy. Maybe even start a spot guy like Josh Richardson or Caleb Martin. But let Rozier get all the shots he wants with that second unit, and suddenly he solidifies the major weak point for them, which is, what do you do when Jimmy sits? Or Bam Adebayo has to sit, or Tyler Hero sits. Yeah, you try to keep one of those guys on the floor at all times, but realistically, all 3 of those guys are second wheel, maybe third wheel offensive type of players. They can be the number 1 guy on certain nights, and Bam, I think especially, but Jimmy's getting to that point in his career. How much longer do you want to keep asking him to do that and be one of your lead defensive guys? So to have another guy in there who you can cycle through. No, Terry Rozier is not a number one option, but dude's going to chuck shots. He's going to make shots. And that takes some pressure off the rest of your scorers, and it starts to hold down that second unit. Terry Rozier can generate offense for himself or for other people, and that opens somebody like Duncan Robinson back up. That opens somebody like Caleb Martin or even Kevin Love here and there to just be able to knock down shots because somebody else got it to them, and it wasn't just because they passed 17 times during the possession to try to get a good look. You had Rozier setting them up. So it is a great move for Miami. Like you said, it's the type of move that you see them seem to make all the time, and here they are.
Did you think that the value trade squared up for you, like a future lottery protected 2027 and Kyle Lowry for Terry Rozier? Do you think that's
I think it is. Miami has made the commitment as a franchise DNA that they will try to compete every single year. And while they'll say they're competing for a championship every single year, and I get that, that's great. Really, what they've committed to is we will be a playoff team in the hunt every single year. So as long as that is still the MO, barring, one of those disaster seasons where everybody's hurt and there's nothing you can do about it. You have Eric Spoelstra locked in long term. You have that DNA. That pick that they conveyed to Charlotte is going to be middle of the road at best, barring that type of disaster that nobody can insulate against. So yeah, I thought it was fair. If I'm Charlotte, they're clearly heading into blow up territory again. And you've got those younger guys like LaMelo Ball, like Miles Bridges, if he can stay out of the court system.
Listen, it's court system or injuries, like to the two big guys. Like it's just that team.
Well, and Gordon Hayward can't stay healthy. Yeah,
like it's just poor Gordon Hayward. Like his last 4 years or so, it's just been. You feel bad for the guy. Like as soon as he got to Boston, it was over. Like it was over. Like literally, like night one, and he just was never the same. So
Terry Rozier just doesn't match up age-wise with what's going to have to happen in Charlotte for them to be able to move forward. So to get a pick out of it, to get out from under that salary, knowing that, no, we're not a playoff team this year. Let's save a little bit of money. Let's get a pick, and let's give minutes to some of the other guys that we want to get a look at because Rozier deserves to play. I thought it made sense for both teams.
To be fair, Charlotte's only 7 games out of the play-in. So, granted, it's hard to be eliminated before the All-Star break. So,
right,
they virtually are.
There's no chance that they're going to suddenly be better than Atlanta, Brooklyn, Toronto, Chicago, the teams ahead.
They're 10-32. You got no faith? You've got no faith. You don't think – okay. Well. Speaking of no faith, let's wrap it up with the Washington Wizards. Or as I alluded to before and actually mentioned, the soon-to-be Virginia Wizards. Because they will definitely be moving. Nice job. What's that guy's name? Ted Leonsis or something?
The Washington Wizards of Virginia. Let's go the LA Angels of Anaheim route.
I love it. I love it. And they have fired Wes Unseld Jr. as this is the most recent news I think we have, like for this in the All-Star game. Wes Unseld Jr. is no longer the head coach. I don't know if you saw this. He was 77 and 130. Pretty good. Pretty good.
He had been there for 3 years, yeah.
So he's been replaced by Brian Keefe, one of the top assistants there. Let me ask you just a question about Washington in general. There was a brief moment where, like, they're pretty good. Like, it was brief, but it was, Bradley Beal awesome, right? And it's not my job. I don't get a lot of money to pay to like figure out how to fix Washington. But if you ask me of the franchises that are like bad right now, and that includes like a 5-win Detroit team that we're talking about, San Antonio, Portland, say Memphis too. If you're telling me the bad teams in the league, the bleakest hope, it seems to me, is in Washington. Because I don't know how this gets turned around in the next 5 years. And I don't know. I didn't even know, like, they're moving Wes Unseld to an advisory role in the office. They're not completely getting rid of him. But I don't know how changing coaches sort of fixes Washington. I don't know if they want it to be fixed, but I don't even know if a scapegoat is helpful at this point. They're in such a hole that I don't know what this accomplishes, and I don't know how you fix them anytime soon.
There's a couple of guys on the roster where you go, okay, they can be pretty decent. Kyle Kuzma, clearly a starter. Denny Avdia might be a starter. But Tyus Jones, Jordan Poole, Daniel Gafford, who are all starting, are probably better off being on the second unit of a good team. Everybody else who's in that second unit right now is, at best, a low rotation player. Bilal Koulibaly is a guy that a prospect for them out of France, has shown some flashes, but again, at best, looks like he develops into a rotation player. Marvin Bagley III, who they just got, who's averaging 18 points a game for the Wizards. It's great to see the former number 2 pick get another chance here to actually get minutes and maybe resurrect his career. This would be the place to do it. But again, at best, what is Bagley going to do? Stick in the NBA, be a rotation scorer off the bench. They don't have, San Antonio sucks, but they've got Wembanyama, they've got Devin Vassell, they've got Keldon Johnson. Detroit sucks, but there are some good young players there who you look at and go, we can do something with this. We can do something with Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren. Hopefully we can do something with Jaden Ivey. The other bad teams that you mentioned, that are sitting at the bottom, let me pull the standings back up again.
Charlotte's Memphis is bad, but Memphis has been destroyed by injuries and these suspensions. Like, there are bad teams, and then there's just the black hole of DC.
Charlotte's got LaMelo Ball. They've got some other younger players who they know are starters. Portland maybe is the closest analogy to Washington.
But Portland, we know what Portland's doing. Portland's got a vision for what they're doing.
Yes. And Portland, when you look at their roster right now, they are sitting on assets that they're just trying to figure out what to do with them. Malcolm Brogdon is not going to be a Blazer long term. He's going to be on a contender. Jeremy Grant's going to be on a contender. DeAndre Ayton could start and stay in Portland for a while during the rebuild, but he could also go somewhere else and be a starter. And then you've got some prospects in Scoot Henderson and Anthony Simons, Shadion Sharp, and that sort of thing. Matisse Thybulle can be a rotation player. They just have a better cupboard right now, player-wise, and I haven't looked at the draft picks of who's stockpiled what. But even Portland's in a better situation, though things seem equally bleak on the court. So I agree with that assessment. Washington is rudderless. They brought in these guys. Tyus Jones deserved a chance to see if he could be a starter in this league. Jordan Poole deserved a chance to see if he could be. Daniel Gafford deserved his chance. But you're seeing right now that they're overmatched as full-time starters, and it doesn't help when you have a bench that's a mess. Coaching, I'm sure, didn't help, but Wes Unseld Jr. was a heralded assistant for a long time coming up. He also has cut his teeth in a lot of different places and probably deserves to get another look somewhere else. So, yeah, coaching's not the issue.
Let me just say that, and I just looked it up for Washington's upcoming draft picks, okay? This year, they have a first and a second from Phoenix. They don't have their own draft pick. They have the right to swap the 2024 first-round protected selection between 13 and 30 for Phoenix's 2024 pick, right? And then Memphis has the right to swap his 2024 first-round pick for the less favorable of the Phoenix and the Washington pick. So, not the best pick. A second-round pick. 2025, they have their own first round and one second round. 2026, they have 2 first rounds and 4 second round picks. So we're a couple of years away from even getting some young college or European League talent into this situation. And if you want to talk about, getting free agents to come to DC, it ain't happening. It ain't happening because unless you're willing to pay obscene amount of money, and I don't think Washington
for a guy who's just a mercenary, because that would be the only reason he'd be there in Washington.
Right. Their future is tough, man. because they don't have a lot of assets. Their future assets don't look great.
It doesn't even benefit them to be bad, is what you're saying. It doesn't even benefit them to be bad.
Yeah, like, okay. Maybe next year you can be bad and that's okay. Man, that's tough, man. That's a tough job to take. Granted, it's one of only 30 in the league, so you get to be able to have a chance to make a lot of money and stuff. But like that, I would think a job like that should give you more of a leash. Although he did have 3 years, so
He did.
It's a decent amount of time. But I don't know, man. If you liked him enough to keep him around, right, for at least in the front office, that way you didn't just want to pay him to go away, you just pay him to hide him somewhere. Then I don't know why you just sort of take him off the court.
It sounds like that. It sounds like it was kind of a mutual decision. Like he showed up and they talked about. They sat down and everybody looked and said, we're not where we need to be. And maybe he was feeling it too. Like I can't do any more than I've done. And because the organization likes him and they trust him and that sort of thing, it's kind of like with Dwayne Casey in Detroit, right? Things did not go the way they were supposed to for Dwayne Casey as coach, but they all respected the effort that was being made and who he was as a person and said he can still be valuable to the organization. And Dwayne Casey's in the front office now and letting Monty Williams lose instead.
In 2028, their first round pick, they had 3 first round picks, except for the best pick of those picks will go to either Brooklyn or Phoenix, not them. So, like,
they're backed into a corner.
Yeah, Brooklyn's going to receive, quote, one of the 2 most favorable of those picks.
The best thing you can do is here at the deadline. I think you could get a first round pick for any of your 5 starters in the right situation. Trade all 5 of those starters and try to get first round picks, even if they look like they're going to be middling first round picks. Just improve your odds to be into the draft. See what you can get. You never know if one of those teams really has a rough year and it turns into something better. And you never know if you find a gem at 16. It happens. Or a guy at 18 or whatever. It happens all the time.
OKC built up by having 1,000 second round picks, basically.
Right. Yeah. You need to trade Tyus Jones. He will be valuable on a different team. Jordan Poole hasn't had the year he wanted, but as a 6th man gunner, somebody might give a first round pick. Denny Avdia is a prospect, and he's shown a lot of promise, especially over the last 20 games. It really seems like he's turning around. Now is the time to cash out on Denny Avdia. Kyle Kuzma, people know he can score. They know that he can be a valuable starting level forward in the league. Daniel Gafford is a guy, maybe you can't get a first round pick for him, but you can get a handful of seconds. Maybe somebody out there gives a first. He is athletic. He can hold down a starting spot as your 5th guy in a lineup.
You think he could get multiple seconds for that guy?
For Daniel Gafford, I think you could. Daniel Gafford, if you watch him play, he is an athlete. There is promise there, and he's not a dumb player. Like, he brings a lot of valuable things, but don't expect him to be your 4th best player. You know, if he's going to be your 5th starter or he's going to be in a timeshare at center, I think a low first round or a pick swap or a couple of seconds you can get for Daniel Gafford. Trade everybody else, in that starting lineup. And yes, they're going to be bad, but
they had another first round pick, but they traded it to the Knicks for this year. Just bad, man. Just bad management everywhere, man. It's just tough. And then obviously you have the story that we've been alluding to over and over again, that the owner wants to basically take all of the Washington teams that he owns, which are them and the Capitals, right? The hockey team, and then bring them to Virginia and build a whole new stadium. Whatever, man. That would suck for DC fans, because I think when they got a good team to watch, that's a pretty good fan base too. When they got a good team, and they got pretty good attendance for being a terrible team this year. When you look at the numbers, I don't need to get the good ones, but you go look on your own. They're pretty well attended for being so bad, which is nice to see. All right, Joel, that's going to do it for. Did we name this the Reggie Miller You Suck episode, or was this the Doc Rivers You Suck episode?
Why not both?
Why not both, you terrible people? Joey, you should say goodbye to the good people.
Goodbye, everybody. If you want the audio-only version of this here podcast, get us on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you find your podcast. If you want video version, we are on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell over there, and we will do this again sometime, hopefully soon in the future. Theoretically, right? Theoretically.
You know who doesn't suck? Joe Cordes. That's who doesn't suck. That's right.
Arky Shea's all right too. He's pretty decent.